So, Long Shot has Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron playing a romantic couple who seem like an unlikely pair. You know, one's a journalist and one's a Secretary of State going for president. Um, doesn't look like they'd hook up, but hey, you know, it's an unlikely romance. It's interesting that when I first saw the trailer for this, my first thought was, okay, this is kind of going to be like a 21st century take on like the American president. Now, I love the American president. I love which, if you might remember in that film, that was when, you know, the president was trying to date the single president was trying to date a lobbyist and trying to conceal that relationship from the public, but then eventually, you know, come to terms with himself. This is kind of a little bit like a gender swap version of that, which I'm actually pretty cool with because I think it does kind of maintain that sweetness to the American president, which had, like, you know, a great script by Aaron Sorkin. And this film actually has a pretty good script too by Dan Sterling and Liz Hannah, who actually have experience writing on stuff like The Post. So it does seem like it's fairly like astute of like the current like political and media climate, but at the same time, you know, knowing enough and also original enough to embrace kind of the, you know, the Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg type producing of comedy, where, you know, they make the obvious, like, you know, weed jokes and sex jokes. You know, you gotta have those. But the good thing is that, you know, I usually don't dig Rogen's types of comedies where he tackles like this type of like comedy, because usually it feels like he picks like these big juicy themes and then doesn't really do anything with them. And to an extent, Long Shot kind of does this if you look at it in the wrong context. Like, you can look at it saying like, oh man, it's making all this commentary on the media and crazy right wingers and like environmentalism. It brings up all these interesting and like current topics and doesn't really provide like a big answer towards it. Like, it kind of like wraps itself into a fable by the end. The good news is that even if it doesn't seem to touch that, even if it doesn't really dig that deep into these topics, it does present a romance that is sweet and sincere and adorable, which is ultimately what I kind of dug more about, you know, the American president, more than anything. Yeah, it's a suit of the times and it's politics, but at the same time, you know, it at the core of this is the romantic relationship here. I think it helps that, you know, it makes more sense that, you know, that we follow more of the characters than we do the actual, you know, the plot of, like, you know, pushing forward this environmental initiative that Charlize Theron is fighting for more than anything, because we really do like these characters here. Seth Rogen plays Fred and this is kind of like a tongue twister. His character's name is Fred Flarsky, and he's essentially an activist journalist. And by activist, I mean he's very, you know, passionate. Like, some of his articles include such headlines as "Fuck you, Exxon," so he's very vocal. And he quits his job because he finds out that the publication he's been writing for has been bought up by a right winger organization called I forgot what it's like. It's not Fox News, but it looks like Fox News and it sounds like Fox News, and its owner is kind of like a cartoonish satire of Rupert Murdoch. I'm trying to remember what his name was here. Let me see. Here we go. Wembley. So the Wembley News Corporation purchases him, and he's like, you know, I'm not gonna write for them. You know, like, I know the guy. They even show the guy who owns it. His name is Parker Wembley. He's played by Andy Serkis, and he's decked out in this old and fat makeup. Like, I didn't, honestly. There's a lot of times where, you know, I can sense Andy Serkis in a film. Here he does that thing where he's done in all his motion capture performances, where he disappears in there. Because usually when he's not motion capture, you can sense him. You can sense that he's there a little bit. Where I kind of had to question it this time. So he ends up quitting his job, and he needs to find a new line of work. And thankfully, he actually ends up getting hired by Charlize Theron playing Charlotte Field, the Secretary of State. She is currently going up for, she's trying to go up for the presidency, and she's using a springboard for that as this environmental initiative. But her one problem is her speeches. They lack some punch. They don't have a lot of humor. And so eventually she connects with Fred and decides, like, oh, well, I'll hire him on to punch up some jokes for me. And they actually have quite an intimate connection because they've actually known each other since childhood. They actually haven't seen each other since childhood, but Fred remembers her. Fred remembers Charlize Theron's character actually babysitting him as a boy. and sharing his first awkward kiss. And once they connect, they click. So like, oh yeah, how you been? How's things going? And they sort of connect over the course of this film, like with their nostalgia of the times. Like, they haven't seen each other for so long, but there's so much they can relate to, both in pop culture and nostalgia. Like it almost seems like destiny. They meet each other at a party where Boyz II Men is playing, which are freaking hilarious in this. And so they naturally have the clashes you expect. They clash over like conforming yourself and trying to hide yourself away, trying to back off of like political initiatives. Like obviously Fred is very passionate about it, and obviously Charlotte just kind of wants to play ball so that she can get up to like the presidency, and so they clash on these issues in about the expected way that you'd expect for them to connect. But thankfully, it does seem like the romance is genuine and it is pure, and it is coming from like a very sweet place here. Because even though this is very much kind of like a political romantic comedy, a lot of the characters are coming more from a more tender and sweet place than they are kind of like the more mean-spirited characters that you might have seen in these other types of films, with like Seth Rogen and produced by Goldberg, and the film it's directed by Jonathan Levine, who has a little bit of experience balancing some of the drama and comedy. You might remember he directed 50-50. So yeah, I mean, they have amazing chemistry. I love seeing every moment with them. They always manage to find just the right jokes to play in there. They find just the right moments to be sweet and awkward and kind of like, and bring in just the right amount of drama that feels very passionate in this film more than anything. And providing more they're great on their own. They have a lot of funny moments, but you have like some great backup comedians here, bringing in a lot of more comedy. O'Shea Jackson Jr. plays Fred's best friend Lance, who seems like a typical friend, but then has like a little bit of a secret that he reveals. That plays a great role in the third act here. Gets in a lot of like blunt and funny lines. Like he's probably the most fierce character in this film by far. I mentioned Andy Serkis playing Parker Wembley. He does a great job playing this very, very slimy scuzzball. You have Bob Odenkirk, who's playing the actual sitting president, who's more enamored with his career in acting. Like it seems like he's using the presidency more as like a springboard into movies, where he's making like a big point, like, oh man, after I'm done with the presidency, it's off to movies, man. That's my next big ambition. He's pretty great in it too. You have Alexander Skarsgård as the Prime Minister of Canada, who has a little bit of a creepy laugh there. And then you got a whole bunch of other great supporting cast members here. I especially like seeing Randall Park again. He's only got like one scene in the film, but God, he owns those scenes so well, with kind of like his uneasy face and his tone and stuff like that. Oh God, he's so good in it. Yeah, I mean, and I guess the one thing I really got to stress about this film more than anything is that, yeah, it is very much like The American President, in that, yes, it's not going to shirk away from the politics of the era. It takes big shots at Fox News. Big shots. In particular, I love how, like, whenever they show like the news montages, where they do this in all of like these films where like characters on like the campaign trail or they're famous, they'll do like the flashes of like news segments of like different anchors talking about them, and of course they flash to Wembley News. They do like a parody of Fox and Friends, where they have two male anchors who making very clearly sexist comments, and there's the woman in the middle who's just kind of like just literally smiles, just like, okay, I gotta sit here and take this. So yeah, it does take big shots at Fox News. It does take big shots at Republicans. It does sort of, like I said, by the third act, it kind of like turns into more of like a fable by that point, to try to make itself sweet. Where even when we do find out that one of the characters is Republican, they are coming from a genuinely heartfelt place here. Of just trying to be themselves. And ultimately, the film has a great message of, trying to, let the truth set you free, trying to, be true to yourself. Don't be afraid of who you are. That message seems kind of basic. Like, that's kind of the expected moral of this type of story. That being said, though, a lot of the scenes with Theron and Rogen, they just work in an amazing way. They work in a way that I couldn't get enough of them. I wanted to see more of them. I wanted to see what would happen next. I'd almost be keen on them maybe doing a sequel with what happens next in their political career. If only because I think there's more to explore here. Because the other thing to touch on is like, how is the media going to look at this? How are people going to take in the fact that someone looking like Rogen is dating someone like Charlize Theron? Like, how are they going to take it, and how are they going to spin it too? Because that's the other thing too. Like they have like the media spin plays like a big part in their relationship that's threatened by both like the media and politics. So there's some interesting themes that are picked up on here. That being said, like I said, it's a Rogen comedy, so it embraces a lot of the drug humor. But I gotta say here, I think they use it pretty well. I particularly love a scene where both Rogen and Theron just go at it with drugs, and then just get just party it up in a club. And at one point she ends up like talking down like a terrorist while she's high on drugs. And I think by this point in the film, it's kind of getting more kind of like fable-ish here, but a sweet fable. It's like, I'd kind of like a world like this, one that seems a little bit believable, but also seems very sweet, and just a little bit genuine. So in terms of that, I mean, I laughed a lot at this. I mean, with the very like astute political commentary, and just like the kind of like the warm nostalgia that's shared between Rogen and Theron, I think is great. I loved watching them together, even in like kind of like their awkward sex scenes. It's pretty sweet. And I laughed a lot. I think I probably laughed at this film more than any other film. And I know that like comedies are kind of in low stock right now, so it's kind of like not like a huge bar. But I gotta say, I laughed quite a bit of this, and I ultimately I just found it adorable. Just to watch this film that looks like very astute of the times and very very sweet between the two leads. So I had a lot of fun. I laughed a lot, and it's just I had a big fat smile on my face by the end of this film. So for Long Shot, 4 out of 5 stars.